Good afternoon, everyone. Again, thank you so much for joining us. This is Robert Hess III with Hess 3 Consulting, and today we are here to talk about contracts and funding streams for prevention. So we hope that you have enjoyed our training series so far. If you have missed any of our previous trainings, today we'll build off of previous content. And so if you've missed any of our previous trainings, they are available for free on YouTube. You just go to our YouTube channel, which if you go to YouTube and search Hess 3 Consulting, you'll find us. And you can see quite a few trainings that we've done this year, as well as some that we did last year. That should be available for you. And of course, please feel free to share those with your friends. If this is your first training with us, so again, my name is Robert. I have about 15 years of experience working in health and human services. A lot of that time has been at various levels of prevention, so doing community-based prevention, as well as kind of working more systemically at the state level as well as national level. I've done some work with SAMHSA and the White House and a couple of other organizations. And I have been working with Arkansas now for, I believe, 6 years. And so it's an honor to continue to be invited back. And of course, there's lots more information available about me online if you're interested. The organization itself, we do a lot of different things. We've been around for about 10 years. We are this year celebrating our 10-year anniversary. And so a lot of our work is focused on strategic planning, project management, development, quality and process optimization, and information management. And a lot of these skills and techniques we're going to be incorporating into what we have incorporated in this training series, as well as into today's conversation. So for the learning objectives for today, we're going to be reviewing different types of funding for prevention. We're going to provide an overview of specific examples for creative funding, and then we're going to detail strategies for securing additional revenue for your initiatives. Last training, I was a little under time, and this training, there's no way I'm going to get through everything that we have in this session. So there are some slides I'm going to breeze by, and some things I put on here strictly and explicitly just for resources and references. And so if you have not received a PDF copy of this PowerPoint, please reach out to Lorraine or to Chucks or Derek at UALR so that they can get you this copy. And again, it will be posted on the YouTube channel typically within about 24 hours. So you can always reference it that way. So this, the context of our conversation today is following the strategic prevention framework, which I'm hoping most folks are familiar with at this point in time. But this is a SAMHSA evidence-based process model that is proven to promote development, reduce risk-taking, build assets and resiliency, and prevent problem behaviors. So the trainings that have been prior in this series have focused on the assessment process, capacity building, strategic planning. We talked a little bit about implementation and project management. We've looked at some evaluation and outcomes monitoring stuff more recently. And so today we're going to be talking about sustainability. And of course, in order to be sustainable, we need to be continuing to pursue revenue and have resources at our disposal so we can continue the work that we're doing. So hopefully today is going to be very kind of practical as well as insightful. And the goal, the way I framed this, is really to kind of think outside the box. I'm trying to be as broad as humanly possible because I think sometimes, especially in community-based work where we're 100% volunteer-based, sometimes we feel very limited and strapped on what we're able to do simply because we're all volunteers and time is very finite. And people, obviously only have so much time to offer. So we're going to think outside the box today. Hopefully that is insightful for everyone. And then our last training of this series is going to be in a couple weeks on the 26th, and that's going to focus on the cultural competency component of the strategic prevention framework. So I hope you'll join us for that. So a couple of weeks ago, I shared with you this spreadsheet, and I talked about that there in 2012, which was just a couple years ago, there was approximately $86 million given to the state of Arkansas from the federal government to help support, to help reduce the availability and misuse of drugs or substances in the state of Arkansas. And that's a big number. That's a lot of resources. And most of the time, I think, again, we feel very strapped and limited on the types of resources that are available. So today we're going to kind of walk through some of these and unpack and kind of brainstorm collectively, how we might be able to participate and or engage some of these additional resources in the work that we're doing. So you can see on the right hand side here, this is kind of our philosophical question that we're going to be attempting to answer, and I'm going to need your help to answer it. So please plan on being very close to that keyboard and participating and offering suggestions in that chat box. So the question we're going to be attempting to answer is, how can we create additional partnerships to leverage these resources to support our existing work? And so let's kind of dive in a little bit to what some of these things are. So one of the documents, I don't know if the office sent it around, but if not, please feel free to reach out and we'll get it to you. But the 2010 strategic plan, the strategic prevention plan for the state of Arkansas, did a really fantastic job. I know it's a little bit old, but it really did a fantastic job at kind of outlining the scope of resources that are available and the breadth of resources that are available within the state. And so I think some of these ones listed here on this slide are probably kind of traditional. I'm almost certain, hopefully everyone in this room is familiar, on this webinar, is familiar with resources available from the Department of Health, and that includes the Department of Behavioral Health here in Arkansas. But the Department of Human Services has resources, the Department of Education receives funding, the Department of Finance and Administration, the Tobacco Settlement Commission, Tobacco Control Board, all of these organizations directly allocate resources for the prevention of access and misuse of drugs. And then these organizations provide some type of prevention support services. So the Department of Human Services, the Attorney General's Office, the University of Arkansas Medical Services, the Game and Fish Commission. This one I thought was really interesting. They have a Hooked on Fishing, Not on Drugs program, which supports pro-social behaviors by promoting fishing as an alternative to substance use. So as we all know, risk factors, for suicide, or I'm sorry, not for suicide, but for substance use include antisocial behaviors, having too much time on your hands, and being unsupervised by a parent, lots of these different types of things. And so by engaging adolescents in pro-social behaviors such as fishing, the Department of Game and Fish, or the Game and Fish Commission, is working in part to help support the work that we're doing. The Criminal Justice Institute also has funding or does supportive resources. And then there's a bunch of additional local prevention support services. So some of these, and a lot of these, especially the U.S. Department ones, the Department of Education, Department of Justice, Department of Health and Human Services, Department of Housing and Urban Development, a lot of this funding funnels down through grant revenue. And so you kind of have to keep your eye on grants.gov to be able to identify when these entities may be offering funding for substance abuse support, and then of course you'd have to apply for it and secure it, but those are additional streams. Of course, the Arkansas National Guard does a lot of work. MAD, some Others Against Destructive Decisions, Pride Youth Programs, Community Development and Crime Prevention Institute, CADCA, so the Community Anti-Drug Coalitions of America, has an Arkansas presence in Arkansas, I should say. National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. So a lot of their work typically focuses on safe driving, which means not driving under the influence of alcohol and or other substances. University of Arkansas Division of Agriculture, the First Lady Ginger BB Initiative. That one I'm not familiar with at all. And the Washington County Sheriff's Office. And so I'm going to stay here for a second. I wanted to list all of these off because I think, again, a lot of us spend a lot of time focusing here in what the Department of Health offers, right? This is where a lot of the funding that goes to the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, that's where their funding comes from predominantly. And a lot of times we focus kind of in these substance abuse block grants that then kind of roll down to communities to do prevention work. But you can see that if we, depending on what our kind of priorities are and our strategies, which we're going to talk a lot about strategy-driven resources, depending on what our initiatives are and the geographic location of where we live, there actually may be some very creative opportunities to braid funding to help support our work. And I don't have the image here in this PowerPoint. I should have included it. I have this fantastic little graphic of braided funding. And so where we take kind of our funding and revenue from the Department of Health and we kind of braid it, so fold it over and mix it in with funding, well, not mix it in, but fold it over with the Department of Education and some funding maybe from Tobacco Control Board, et cetera, to kind of help create a really comprehensive type of programming. So before I move on to kind of talking a little bit more abstractly, or a little bit more, not abstractly, but not as finite, I'm not going to identify specific organizations that have resources. I want to pause and ask, have any of us actually procured resources from these different organizations? And maybe it would make sense for you to identify, just one organization, the number of different funding streams that maybe you currently receive or have received in the past. And they can be the ones I just listed, or maybe even additional ones that I've not listed. So the question is, and if you'll type in the chat box, how many different funding streams are you currently using or have you used in the past to fund your prevention initiatives? So that just be 1, 2, 10, hopefully 100 different funding streams. But maybe think that through. Okay. I want everyone to answer for me if you can. So if I got one response, it's great. How many other, if you don't know, that's okay. Maybe just put in a question mark, but I want to hopefully see some folks responding. Okay, thank you, Laura. All right. So yeah, I mean, it seems like there's definitely some opportunity if we don't know, or if the number is less than 5. There's probably some opportunity for us to think creatively around how these different resources could benefit us. And of course, this is going to be really specific to the work that you're doing. So it's impossible. We have about 17 people on the line. I'm going to assume, or I'm going to project that means we have 17 different organizations doing 17 different types of projects, even if they're similar thematically, they're different coalitions or entities. So obviously not everyone is going to be applicable to join the Game and Fish Department in their Get Hooked on Fishing, Not on Drugs campaign. Maybe that's not part of your strategies. Maybe you're not even focusing on adolescents. So, I mean, of course, the onus is going to be on each of us to kind of think through how these different entities can support our work. But I would really challenge all of us to go through this list. And again, you should have a copy of this via PDF, or again, I'm happy to send it to you if you don't have it. Or you'll be able to rewatch this on YouTube in about 24 hours. But to go through this list and identify, could it be a potential opportunity for partnership or collaboration or no? And I would literally go through and put a yes or a no by every single organization and entity here on this list. And all of the ones that are yeses, then I would start doing some investigation and research into what existing funding exists today, like is currently available. If there isn't any funding that is currently available, then I would reach out and identify the organizations that they are currently funding or the programs that they're currently managing, and seeing if there's an opportunity to collaborate with them. And we're going to talk about the value of kind of those in-kind resources or those partnership resources, because those can be just as beneficial and sometimes even more beneficial than just receiving funding to do your own thing. So we're going to keep going through, but I just wanted to make sure that we pause and kind of reflect on who are these potential partners, what are their current resources, and how can we potentially engage with them around our work to mutually support one another so that we can have more capacity in order to move forward. So this next slide is kind of a transition away from existing revenue, and it's really kind of more entrepreneurial of sorts in ways to generate revenue where there isn't any. And so in the past, I've actually done whole trainings just on this one slide. So I'm going to take probably too much time walking through some of this, but I wanted to make sure that I could cover other things as well. So if you participated in this training in the past, fantastic. If not, I do think it's recorded, so hopefully it's helpful. Otherwise, I'm happy to send you the PowerPoint. So to create funding where there is no funding, from a local community perspective, I'm going to try and keep this on like a municipal level, so at the city level. There are lots of mechanisms that could potentially be employed through some advocacy and lobbying with your city council and your mayor, or the county, depending on where you are and what your relationships exist, in order to generate additional funding to support prevention. Now, obviously, a lot of times this stuff includes an uphill battle, and it takes a lot of really strong relationships, and it takes a lot of work to organize, and it is definitely not a short-term revenue generator, but it may create kind of a long-term revenue stream that could really support your efforts. And so obviously what I'm talking about here is the use of tax revenue. So either increasing existing taxes and or introducing new taxes like excise taxes to be able to generate and have it specifically allocated to generate revenue for prevention. And so what this could look like, and what I've seen this look like in other communities, is there's a 1 cent tax added on all liquor sales or tobacco sales within a particular city or state, if you're able to get that passed. And that 1 cent tax becomes aggregated and then distributed for alcohol prevention or tobacco use prevention or substance use prevention, or youth development programs, etc. And so typically the funding, if you're successful, the money goes into the city government, and then the city government would start like a local youth development grant program. So then you'd be able to turn around as an independent organization and apply for funding for those types of things. Again, you could also use property taxes. Income taxes are a little bit harder. That probably would have to happen at the state level. But specifically, like sales taxes, typically monitored and administered at the city level. And then your excise taxes there's a lot of terms, but excise tax is the same thing as a value-added tax, which is the same thing. It's like a jargon term as a sin tax. So you're getting taxed for sinning by smoking or by consuming alcohol or even sugar-sweetened beverages. There's a lot of different ways that this has been implemented, but that can become a really significant source of revenue. Has anyone ever done that? This is kind of like a big pie in the sky type of thing, especially if you're not plugged into kind of local government or even like state or federal government types of work. But I'm interested if you have ever done work kind of lobbying or engaging with the city or the county or the state or even the feds. Type a Y for me in the chat box. And if you haven't, for the sake of participating, type a no for me in the chat box, or an N. So everyone should be responding. Give me a Y for yes and N for no. Okay. Perfect. That's exactly what I'm wanting. I'm actually wanting to see a lot of no's, because that means we're plopping a new idea in your brain, and hopefully it will germinate. Thank you, Lisa. So yeah, it absolutely can be applicable for a broad spectrum of things. Of course, we use this for education funding and lots of different things, but definitely an opportunity for prevention. I have seen it done, and I've seen it be very effective. I've seen it attempted and fail. So it's not easy, and it's definitely like a long game type of strategy, but it can absolutely take place. And I think even, specifically in like smaller rural areas, it might be easier to build relationships with, kind of your local politicians or local government. And it might actually be easier to get this done depending on what your relationships are. Whereas you see in kind of bigger cities, there's a lot more industry involvement and a lot more lobbyists working aggressively to kind of get their interest forward. So it'd be interesting to see, as some of y'all that are working in more rural areas, if you have any success in this. So the second kind of funding is contract revenue or contracts. And so a lot of times, and I'm being very specific, that a contract is not a grant. even though you do sign a contract with a grant, typically, contract revenue is literally an agreement for the exchange of goods and services, and I want to limit it to that. And so typically you see this a lot in treatment providers. So if you're a substance abuse treatment provider, if you're a behavioral health treatment provider, if you're a foster care organization, you get a contract and it's based off the number of people you're serving or the types of services you're selling. But it is guaranteed revenue based off of some unit. How this applies to prevention, you can find lots of different ways to establish kind of long-term consistent contracts with different organizations and entities. And so what I've seen and how I've seen this done with other prevention organizations is they use their expertise in substance use and substance abuse prevention. I've seen folks partner with human resource departments at large corporations, and once a year they come in, or twice a year, or every time there's a new employee orientation, they come in and they provide substance abuse education. Obviously, employers don't want their employees using substances. And so, you're able to provide and use your knowledge base as a means to generate some revenue. And of course, that revenue in this instance would be going back into the coalition. So you'd have to find volunteers, or you'd have to pay them less than what you're charging the organizations or the corporations to provide this training. I've seen this done similarly where school districts and educational institutions, so whether it's middle school, high school, or colleges and universities, will also contract with substance abuse prevention folks to come in and kind of do education and awareness in their schools to help identify and do early intervention. So that's an interesting version or iteration of this, because you're literally getting paid to do your intervention of what you'd probably be doing for free typically. But I do know of organizations that do that, and they actually make a lot of money doing that. And that's how they're able to maintain and sustain their work. And they've been doing this for 15 years now, and they've been incredibly successful. And so I think that in theory speaks to, I'm jumping a little bit down to number 8 on here, which is profits, because in that case, you're kind of exchanging services. Your education and awareness is the service that you're exchanging for funding or money, and the profits are what kind of support your work. But doing that on a contract basis can really help you kind of plan and project your income and your revenue for the year or for the next 3 years or 5 years, etc. So outside of like treatment provider contracts, there are opportunities for you to outreach and engage and kind of create revenue by using your expertise. I've also seen, this is less common, but based off of the work that you're doing, if you're doing a lot of like grassroots community organizing, you're doing a lot of education, or doing kind of door-to-door work or presentations and everything. And I'm kind of jumping into number 4 a little bit as well. But I've seen folks partner with for-profit entities and or other types of campaigns that need people on the ground to kind of do that same work. And so you give your presentation, you talk about your stuff, your education, you provide psychoeducation around substance use, which would be like your prevention intervention. And then concurrently, you're partnering with and using your existing programming to bring people to the table, and those for-profit entities would pay you sponsorship dollars, or some type of incentive in kind or cash to gain access to the people that you're outreaching. So what I mean by this, and I'll give this very specific example, and again, I'm jumping around a little bit, so I'm currently talking about number 4 on this PowerPoint, talking about sponsorships. But there was an organization that I worked with that was doing education in middle schools and high schools, and I've talked about them a lot. And so those of you that have listened to me ramble have probably heard this before. But so they were hitting a lot of organizations. So they, at one point in time, in 1 year, they hit 250,000 students and faculty doing peer-to-peer substance abuse education. And so there was an organization that recently just got bought out by Panera Bread Company. I'm pretty sure do you guys have Panera in Arkansas? Someone give me a yes if you do, or an if you don't. It's like a soup and salad spot. Perfect. So this entity recently got bought out by Panera Bread Company. But so um, Panera, as I'll just say, paid them, gave them $100,000 just in sponsorship, but then also subsidized or provided like free food and refreshments to all of their faculty and parent trainings. And there's literally hundreds of trainings a year. They did thousands of school trainings, and I think they probably did 2,000 parent and faculty trainings, if I'm not mistaken, and then like tens of thousands of student trainings. But so Panera, subsidized this ginormous amount of revenue or in-kind food, which for Panera as a like family-friendly restaurateur, gave them free exposure and access to all of these people, right? Because they're getting basically for a very little amount of money, they're getting exposure to 250,000 individuals. And then concurrently, one of the other things that happened is Panera started selling, I think, $1 of all of the proceeds from their restaurants in the state that this organization operated in went back to the organization. So this is where the actual cash came into play, that $100,000 I was talking about. And then in addition, Panera was selling like water bottles or something that had been branded for this organization and included substance abuse statistics. And they got, a certain percentage of all the water bottle sales within their organization. So that's like a really fantastic example of like a public-private partnership with a, with a private organization that, due to some relationships that they had, was able to really help them raise a significant amount of money in addition to kind of helping support their work. So again, I jumped around a bit. So I talked about contracts, and that's again kind of like a fee-for-service arrangement, or you guys providing a service in exchange for revenue. Grants, I want to assume that most people are very familiar with, and we talked about some of those in the previous slides from like the Department of Education or Department of Juvenile Justice, the Department of Health and Human Services on the federal level, and then within the state. The other thing I do want to note, those are all like public or government grants. Of course, there are private organizations and foundations that operate nationally, like the Dave Thomas Foundation associated with Wendy's. They give away a lot of money for youth development activities. So does Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And then locally, even within the state of Arkansas, I'm not super familiar with them, but I have to imagine that there are private foundations locally within the state that may also offer funding. Maybe it's only $5,000 or $10,000. But if you secure enough of those, you can obviously, make a big impact, and you can do a lot of good work with $5,000. Sports teams are very frequently giving away funding or have some type of grant program that they offer or give back to the community type of program, as well as large corporations that operate or have their base or hub in the state of Arkansas. And so grant revenue, while I'm kind of breezing over it, is a huge proportion of revenue for a lot of prevention activities. And so definitely please scour grants.gov. If, kind of check that every month if you don't already. And another opportunity is kind of take those grants or those foundations, private foundations that kind of fund your type of work, and start compiling a spreadsheet, of when their grants are typically open, if there's any specifics around the grant requirements, and every year. So how do I say this? So one thing that I think a lot of people do specifically with grants is they kind of like do a search on a whim. One day they decide I'm going to go searching for grants, and they look at a ton of stuff, right? They're going to look at 100 grants, which would probably take like a week to look at 100 different grants or foundations, and they see that only 5 of them apply to them, right? Because people are funding all kinds of things, nature and wildlife, where there's specific requirements in geographic communities, whatever. And so a lot of people then get disheartened, or they stop searching for grants. So what I would recommend is kind of acknowledging that grants happen on a cycle, so they come up every year. So even if you find 100, only 5 of them apply to you, maybe even apply to all 5 of them, you don't get any of them. Well, you now know that those 5 grants are going to be available again next year. And so you might have some opportunity to then engage those foundations if they're local, have some conversations with, like literally call them, set up a meeting, go sit with them and talk with them and find out if the work that you're doing or what parts of the work that you're doing are appealing to them and are interesting to them, that they might be interested in funding. Because maybe you ask them to fund food for all your training and they have an exclusion and they will never ever fund food for the training, but they'll fund the traveler's fees or the trainer fees to bring in those trainers, or the facility rental fees, whatever it might be. So don't be disheartened on grants, even if you've not had a lot of success in the past. Start building a database, figure out or make sure to document when those due dates are, because they're going to come up about the same time every year. So if you have no success this year, try again next year and continue to build this list of foundations, whether they be national or local, that you can apply for funding from. And all funders have a cycle. And so, the federal cycle is typically in October, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while since I've done it's been a while since grant writing has been my primary responsibility. So I've lost a little bit of touch, but if you know that funding for the feds is going to come out or is going to be awarded or distributed in October, that means they're going to be releasing an RFP, in the spring, so they can review it in the fall and award it in October. So kind of getting a sense of when those different types of things are taking place is really important. And don't lose heart, because there's lots of money out there and you just got to keep on pursuing it. So I talked about sponsorships. Sponsorships, very simply, finding for-profit organizations that you can find a way to kind of be mutually beneficial. And so sponsorships are different than grants, even though an organization might offer both. So like, for example, I talked about the Dave Thomas Foundation that's associated with Wendy's. Coca-Cola has a foundation, Pepsi has a foundation, all these big entities do. And so they give away money via grants, but they also pay sponsorship fees and dues. And so those are two totally separate buckets. One's handled by PR, the other one's handled by development, or some other function with the charity, or some other function within their organization. And so if you have access to people, if your work that you're doing is really generating a lot of exposure, even if it's on a local level, exposure to 5,000 people might be sufficient for like a smaller organization. Or if you are getting a large footprint and you're hitting 100,000 people a year somehow, even if it's like on a billboard, you can definitely start pursuing sponsorship funding as well. And I talked a little bit about that example with Panera Bread, which kind of falls under this sponsorship thing. Special events, again, I think that a lot of people are familiar with this. So you can host a dinner, a gala. A lot of people, especially donors, they get really burnt out with galas. And so thinking abstractly over fun events, bringing in headliners, of course, it typically takes a little bit of revenue, especially you have to front that money up front. So if you can help find underwriters or wealthy people that are interested in donating, or maybe it's just a cocktail hour, or, I think there's a lot of interesting perceptions on using alcohol to raise money for alcohol prevention or substance use prevention. So definitely weigh and consider that for yourself, but you might be more successful. One of the organizations I used to work with, they had a very strong adolescent alcohol abuse prevention campaign. And this is kind of like behind the scenes, probably behind closed doors, and I probably shouldn't be repeating it type of thing. But they, there's a kind of an acknowledgement that you get people a little warm and toasty and they write bigger checks, or they're, more sympathetic towards the cause. And so just something to consider. I'm not saying I'm for it or against it. Individual donors. So looking at donations and trying to procure donations, think about this as very distinct, different targeted campaigns. So your one-time donors may be folks that you get to special events. So you do, kind of an ask at the special event, or you have, coffee with a, philanthropist or someone, and they're going to write you a check one time. And so I've had these conversations with folks. I mean, the largest check I personally have ever received is $50,000. But I definitely know organizations that get much larger checks from one-time donors. And so those one-time conversations tend to be very strategic. You spend a lot of time trying to gain access to that person, that philanthropist. Of course, you have to get to know them personally. You have to build a relationship, and then you're able to engage them in the ask. And I definitely would recommend you take your time to do that, because it's based off of that relationship that is going to make them willing and able to donate to you. But that's a very different strategy than a monthly giving campaign. So a monthly giving campaign is really about getting the most number of people to give you money every single month. And that might be $5 a month or $25 a month. I mean, I think that typically in a monthly giving campaign, the biggest number that you're going to typically see, I think the average donation is about $20 a month, $25 a month. And on the large side of that is you're going to have like 5% of your donors giving you $100 a month. It's really rarely ever going to exceed that. And so, but if you can get 10 people to give you $10 a month, that's the same thing as one person to give you $100 a month. And so this is really about reaching the masses. There are a lot of really fantastic tools out there. There's website widgets and things that you can do where people can just automatically program a deduction to come out of their bank account of 10 or $25 a month, and they do it mindless. And you really want them to do that. I highly recommend investing. If you're going to do a monthly giving campaign, invest in getting one of those widgets or one of those programs. And I think even Salesforce has an option to do this. There's a bunch of online donor websites and things. But you really want to convince people to let it automatically happen, because if they have to physically write you a check, or if they have to physically hand you a check, it's never going to actually get to you. Or if they have to go online and fill out their credit card information every month, it's never going to happen. So convince them or make the investment in the reoccurring donation technology and help people sign up. And then, of course, legacy giving is the nice way of saying people bequeathing their assets to you at the time of their death. This is much more rare. You do see this with larger foundations where, they receive cars and boats and houses and property, or an entire estate, which may include, life insurance and things like that. You typically, while it exists and it's out there, it's typically only very, very large organizations with very strong reputations like the Red Cross or the Salvation Army, or some of those larger entities that are able to really pull this off effectively and meaningfully. The downside of receiving someone's car is that you then have a car you have to sell and insure or whatever it is. And so I offer it just as another way to kind of stretch the imagination, so to speak, of different ways to think about funding. Membership fees or user fees is another opportunity. You really have to be able to answer that, what's the value we're offering people? What's in it for me? And so if you're able to craft together some type of package that people are really interested in, then you can absolutely apply and get membership fees or user fees. And so, maybe this is a series of events. If you do, a quarterly event every year, or an event every quarter, so 4 events a year, and it's typically, $100 to get into the event. But if you become a member, so as opposed to paying $400 a year, you only have to pay $300 a year. And you get into all 4 events. I'm not really sure, but you could do this theoretically based off of like training hours. If you're offering CEUs for clinicians that need those training hours, maybe you can, create a membership platform. There's a lot of different things. I mean, if you could partner with gyms or some other type of facility that people want to gain access to. I mean, I have seen this done, but it really is based off of you having something really significant that people want, and offering it to them at an exchange. And so maybe it's exclusive access to, keynote speakers when you do your events, or celebrities, or if you are doing special events again and you are bringing in like artists, musical artists, or celebrities and stuff, maybe members only get access to them for like a meet and greet or a private dinner or something. You can think abstractly, and depending on what you're looking for and how much money you're trying to raise, this may be meaningful for you. I'm going to try and speed up because we still have a lot to cover, but I hope that you guys are finding this meaningful, and I hope it's helping to kind of think outside the box of just traditional government grant funding and revenue, which I think a lot of us are used to. So profits, another, we talked about this a little bit previously when we talked about the training example, but I also know organizations that actually like create goods and services, or goods, specifically products, that they sell, and they use the profits to support their prevention initiative. So one of the examples of this is First Check in-home drug testing kits. The founder of that organization took his revenue, his profit revenue, and funneled it into prevention work. And so the product was a substance abuse, or it's an in-home drug testing kit, and I'm sure it's throughout Arkansas, it's national, it's a huge organization, it's a multi-million-dollar organization now, I think over $100 million or so in revenue. And so it started as like a family's passion centered around empowering families to know and to be able to monitor, their children's substance use. And so that's where the in-home drug testing kit came from. And then they used that, again, to further prevent substance abuse. And this was because that particular family had lost their son to substance use. And so it was a very profound, impactful personal story. But as I mentioned, they were bringing in $100 million in revenue from this product that they were selling, which then meant that they had, I don't know what the profit margin was on that, but they had their profit margin that they were then able to use to fund prevention. So again, I don't know, maybe someone on this call is going to be the next 100 millionaire. And if you are, don't forget about me on your way up. But, there are other creative ways that people generate income from the sale of goods and services. There's a lot of kind of social enterprise coffee shops and other types of products out there that really use kind of their social good message as part of their sales pitch, and they're able to engage folks. And so that product could literally be anything. Of course, it makes sense if you're able to link it to kind of your purpose. But social enterprising is a huge growing market, and is definitely something I think that we could kind of participate in and engage. And then in-kind revenues. In-kind just basically means it's free. So someone's giving you a good rather than cash. And so maybe this is a facility rental. Maybe someone's allowing you to use the auditorium in order to do your presentation, or someone, as I mentioned previously, like Panera Bread Company, was underwriting the food and meals or refreshments for training. And so that was an example of an in-kind donation. Another example that I think is very applicable for us is earned media, or in-kind media. Excuse me, I don't know why I wrote. No, it's earned is correct. Sorry. So earned media is when a radio station or a publication donates space to you. So I'm sure a lot of us are engaging in community education and awareness campaigns. And so by building relationships with media professionals, whether that be print, radio, TV, podcasts, websites, those types of things, there's a lot of ways for us to generate awareness and really perform our intervention. We would be paying for this otherwise, but because of the relationships we've built, they're going to donate that space to us, that time, airtime, TV time, whatever it may be. They donate a free banner ad on their website. I'm not sure, but those are all other ways to think about procuring resources that don't expend our resources. So similar to the previous question, how many of these strategies have you guys used to fund your prevention activities? And I warned you I was going to take a really long time on this slide, so thank you for bearing with me. But I want to see if you could type in the chat box for me, how many of these different strategies. We have 9 different opportunities up here. I'm sure if you're receiving like grant revenue, currently, then that would be one, obviously. So Aaron, awesome. Looks like you have some pretty diverse funding with 4 different opportunities. But how about other folks? How many different opportunities off of this list are you currently using, or have you used in the past? Perfect, Lisa. That sounds exciting. It sounds like you have some really fantastic experience. Yeah. So, in the perfect world, you would really, want to use as many as possible. So I'm excited to see that we're, getting 3 and 4 and 5, or as Lisa mentioned, she's just all of them. Yeah. That's absolutely what we want to be doing. And so if you've not used a certain strategy up here for revenue generation for your prevention work, start thinking about how you could do that. And that brainstorming process. And again, I'm happy to be receptive and listen if you want to bounce ideas on different strategies and things you can do. So as we're organizing our thoughts, there's quite a few things that we want to do in terms of sustainability planning. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. The first half of this, which has been a lot more than half of our time, has really focused on kind of specific strategies around sustainability. And so how do we organize all of this? And that really gets into our sustainability plan. So sustainability plan, for those of you that have heard me talk about this before, should be a written document. It can be a goal on your strategic plan if you would like, and then you can build it out there. Or it can be a separate document in and of itself where you talk about strategically how are you going to procure revenue and resources, because it could be in-kind resources as well, to generate and support your activities long term. The rule of thumb, of course, is to keep it simple. And so I know some of the strategies I talked about today are not necessarily simple. So, getting excise taxes to generate, or sin taxes passed in order to generate revenue, or legacy giving campaigns, or even identifying big donors. Sometimes it's kind of a long-term strategy, and it takes some serious long-term planning. But what we can do is you never walk a mile if you don't take the first step. And so, we can start by, doing some of those baby steps this year or today, or, in the next 3 months or whatever, and then allowing that time to start progressing. So aim for the low-hanging fruit, identify where you can get your quick wins. Maybe it's not a big deal for you to add a monthly giving campaign to your existing website, and maybe you have a good database of folks that you're currently circulating your newsletter to, and asking them all for a $5 donation won't hurt you any. Or maybe your brother or partner or spouse is the mayor of a town, and asking them to pass a 1-cent tax on soda also isn't hard for you. Whatever your low-hanging fruit and quick win is, aim for that and find a way, or start thinking about how you can implement it and operationalize it. Of course, as I mentioned, everything in our trainings are kind of built upon each other. So in your kind of strategy and thinking through the process, you want to go back to your needs assessment, go back to your community data, and identify specifically what are the needs that the community identified. And so allow this data to drive your strategies. So as I described previously, one of the benefits or things that I thought was really kind of artistic almost about the Panera Bread Company example is that, we know that strong family bonds and pro-social bonds to leaders and mentors and child and adult bonding is one of the strongest protective factors for substance use prevention. So what is better than being able to use dinner time and sharing meals together as a family as a strategy to promote pro-social bonding and substance abuse prevention? I honestly don't think that Panera and that organization ever really made those really strong connections, but to me, that was like the most artistic, beautiful, perfect opportunity that really could have been leveraged. Similarly, the Get Hooked on Fishing, Not on Drugs campaign, kids need things to do. They need pro-social activities. They need mentors to help them. So that's another fantastic opportunity. And maybe you can go, I don't know much about fishing, but you could potentially approach, lure companies and bait shops and things like that to either support financially to give donations and or to help develop similar programs in your local community, rec centers. I mean, all kinds of different things. The travel industry as well, family vacations, spending time together, doing activities outdoors. Like there's a lot of different things that could be done in order to procure resources, but that should all stem from your needs assessment and what your community identified as the greatest risk factors and protective factors contributing to substance use. And that's how you really you have to make those linkages in order to make that positive change. So, and I kind of talked about this a little bit, so I jumped ahead, but really asking, once you identify what those needs are, who's interested in those issues? And so not only formal providers and your authorized leaders, but think about your informal stakeholders. So again, those for-profit entities, as I just described, like the bait and tackle shop or the rec center, or the travel industry, or whatever it is in your local community that may also be interested in giving adolescents something positive to do, or getting families to spend more time together. There's a lot of different mechanisms and ways to make those connections, but once you can make those connections, you then have your sales pitch, so to speak, to help engage these folks in generating resources and revenue for your campaign. And then again, we talked about, kind of unauthorized leaders, so your wealthy peers, family members, advocates, community members, volunteers, celebrities, anyone that may be local, that may, again, as I described, the founders of that first check in-home drug testing kit, they started it because of a family experience that was really traumatic and awful for them. And there are absolutely lots of other individuals out there that share, substance abuses in their family, and maybe they happen to be the governor, or maybe they happen to be a local celebrity or basketball player, or football coach, or whatever that may be. But because of an aligned experience or value set or experience, as I said, you'll be able to engage them in your conversation. So maybe you know some of those people, maybe you don't know some of those people, but starting to keep your mind open and asking those questions, and then starting that process of investigation will help you again to connect to these resources. So bidding grant writing, we talked about this, so I'm just going to skip through this slide, especially for the sake of time. Different ways to find this, to find resources. I talked about grants.gov. That's where you're going to find your federal grants. There are lots and lots and lots of other resources. There are lots of services you can pay for to gain access to grants. You can sort them by type. Personally, I've never been a super big fan of those. I think you kind of get less bang for your buck. You get a whole bunch of irrelevant grants that don't align, but there are some good ones out there. And so, there typically is a fee involved for registering with them, but there's also Google. And so if you're willing to put in the legwork, or you have some volunteers that are able to help you build out a spreadsheet, then, just spending some time doing some searching. One of the things I used to do with one of my clients is every month we would apply for 2 grants. And whether they be small private foundations or whether they be big government grants, that was our goal. And so every month we, would search and find about 10 grants, and we would end up applying for 2. And so we just made it a monthly process, and so it wasn't this one-time event. And again, we kind of built out that spreadsheet. So maybe, there's certain times of the year, as I said, these things operate in cycles. So certain times of the year, 5 grants were all closing at the same time. So, maybe some months we'd apply for a couple more, and then we'd balance it out later. But we continued to build that spreadsheet, and every year, or every month, we'd add to it. And it eventually became very cyclical and kind of it became automated almost, because we also then had a lot of language we had used to describe our different programs and services and everything like that. So that's definitely something you should incorporate into your work if you're not already doing it. And maybe you just apply for 1 grant every 2 months because that's all you have the capacity to do. But definitely consider doing that. I'm going to skip this. When you're looking at grants.gov, there are some nuances and differences between a request for application and a request for quote. a request for proposal, a request for grant application, a request for information, and then these different numbers, R01, R03, R21, R34. These are all different things. So just pay attention to that because early in my career, I made the mistake of presenting a bunch of, it was HIV prevention work I was doing, but I presented an organization with a bunch of funding opportunities for HIV, and they were all research only. And and they looked at me like I was just a moron, and I kind of was at the time, so I get it. But just make sure that you're paying attention to, just because the title says substance abuse prevention, they might be looking at a request for a quote, which is going to be very different. So they're asking like how much would it cost to provide substance abuse services versus a request for an R or like an R34, which would be a research thing. So they're looking for you to study substance abuse prevention versus actually provide it or do it. So just little nuances. Just some tips that I think most folks are probably familiar with. If you've done grant writing, use the writing process, and use a team of people. Do pre-writing, draft it, revise it, edit it, revise it, edit it, revise it, edit it, and then have your final. So you really want to make sure you have enough time to go through all of those steps. Of course, it helps to have a business plan. I'm sorry I'm rushing through this. I'm dramatically behind as far as time. So you'll have these slides available. But make sure you use your business plan and your strategic plan so that you can clearly describe your organization and everything that you are and are doing. So your strategic plan will help define some of those things. I'm going to skip this slide entirely, but you'll have it. I'm going to skip this as well. I'm just going to go ahead and jump down to the end because we're at the end of our time. But so what you'll see, so there's some ideas on how to craft your pitch and making sure that you're telling your value, or communicating your value. There's some specific recommendations in here centered around special events for you. So you can think through different ways to coordinate those things. Of course, your logistics matter with special events, so make sure you think through those things. Using your network analysis or social networking analysis, identifying the people that are in your network. So it's not who you know, or it's not what you know, but who you know. But it's not only just who you know, but it's who you know knows. I had to think about that. And so thinking about every time you meet with someone, are you able to help us with this? Do you know anyone that can? Or are you interested in participating and donating? Do you know anyone that might be interested in participating or donating? Always asking that follow-up question whenever you're pitching folks or meeting with them is really, really helpful because it will help you connect to additional resources. So I know that this is a very simple concept, but it's powerful. And I've literally built my entire career off of that simple add-on question of, if you're not, even if you are or you're not interested, do you know anyone else that might be? And just asking that question, again, will unlock some really significant doors. Thinking through how you're going to craft that conversation. So this is really applicable when you are lobbying. So if you're trying to, again, work to pass taxes or new policies, if you're doing those big donor pitches to try and get big checks, if you're, whatever you're procuring your resources, personal tip, it's just my way of doing it. Other people do it differently. I never, ever, ever, ever ask for anything on the first date. And so that is just an introduction. It's just to get to know one another. Some people are going to be more direct and really want you to ask and ask you what you want. And that's okay. So be prepared for that. But I personally always use the first introduction as a time just to get to know one another and build a rapport and a relationship. Crowdsourcing, I'm not even going to go here. This is a whole different training. And then just just real simple practical tips. And I hope that they're not patronizing, so to speak, but really making sure that when you're engaging with folks that you are being engaging. And a lot of times we get really nervous and we get really excited about our work and we want to talk a lot. But building relationships is really about listening a lot. And so making sure that you're making those connections and that you are definitely demonstrating interest in them. And of course, you want to listen. It's hidden. Listen for those shared values, experiences, interests, because that's what's going to help you connect to that person and help them want to be or want to participate with you, whether that's writing a check or volunteering or whatever that may be. So we are at our time. I really apologize that I needed to rush so quickly through the end of that. Again, if you would like to receive credit for participating in today's session, we do need you to fill out that online survey. So I just put the link again in the chat box. You can click it right now and go ahead and fill that out briefly. This is my email address and my cell phone number. So if something I talked about today struck your interest and you want some more info or you want to bounce ideas off of me, whatever, I'm always happy to listen and to connect folks to additional resources. Or if for whatever reason you've not received today's PowerPoint and you need me to email it to you, please feel free to ask. And again, the other document that I hope that the team was able to send around, if not, email me for it and I'll send it to you, is that strategic plan or strategic prevention plan that Arkansas developed in 2010, because I really feel, A, it was done very well, and B, it really helped to itemize some great opportunities for revenue and funding that are local and specific to the state of Arkansas. With that, I will, of course, will open it up for questions. I'll hang out a couple minutes. If you have them, please feel free to type them in the chat box. But otherwise, you are all free to go. Thank you so much, and I hope you all have a great afternoon.